the leader of the One South Africa movement, Mmusi Maimane, says to fix the energy crisis, the ANC must be removed as the governing party. According to Maimane, the president has many plans but lacks the ability to implement them. He joins us now on Today here on ENC to discuss his views. Good afternoon, Mr. Maimane. Welcome to Today. Thank you very much for your time. Just your overriding reaction first, because before we delve deeply into your concerns, how did you respond to when the president was making all those announcements last night?
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to fellow South Africans. I think the most crucial thing is that many of the plans have been shared before. We've heard them over and over again. And secondly, the situation requires deliberate plans if we're going to right the energy crisis in the right direction. So to me, I was deeply disappointed at the president's remarks. I thought that it didn't feel as though he appreciated the gravity of what an energy crisis means for business in this country, for social services, and more than anything, the plan to say IPPs, etc., should have been something that was done a good 10 years ago if we already were serious about that, because that plan was discussed as long back as then.
So when you hear him and with this disappointment and you say there should have been a deliberate plan, what would that look like? What would be different in your view from what he's presented to what you are calling a deliberate plan?
Well, some of the more crucial things is that how do we intra-trade within Africa itself? The president spoke about importing energy. I would have looked at a much broader grid that is controlled and owned by many of the SADC countries so that we can benefit from blended energy that pertains to solar in other countries, gas for example, in the Malawi, Mozambique areas. How do we incorporate that so that we stabilize the grids of all the respective countries furthermore? I would have gone much more aggressive to say, for individual citizens and communities and households, how do we ensure that we stabilize energy by giving them the right to generate so that they can sell back into the grid, but give them the appropriate rebates so that they themselves can see the benefits of that. And then lastly, I think that we need to look at how we cost energy, because energy isn't just the provision of energy, but it's also about the cost behind it, which I think is adding to inflationary pressures for many of the citizens in this country. So to me, I thought that whilst some of these things can be done, I think that the speed at which the presidency moves and the speed at which ultimately implementation occurs has been far too slow to me for a process that's been going on for 15 years. I really want this country to succeed, and I want the presidency to succeed. But it's quite saddening and disheartening when you hear more of the same in a time of a crucial crisis.
Now, you're hearing more of the same, but just to unpack a little bit of your three key points you've raised around a SADC regional grid. We could have been, maybe it could be more comprehensive, more aggression in terms of individual households, the right to generate and the rebates. You don't think the idea of the solar panels is somewhat going in that direction, or you think it's too little or too late?
Well, it certainly is, but the sun is not something that's new in this country. In fact, storage capacity around solar has been an ongoing discussion for as long as the last 10 years have been. So I would have seen that for every building in the last 5 years should have been consciously that you can't build without putting solar panels on your roofs. South Africa benefits from that. A province like the Northern Cape, to have only allocated IPPs around solar now is exactly like as they say, when should we have done it last year? But now that we're doing it now, must be much more aggressive, because we can benefit from the amount of solar that is attracted in that particular province specifically. So to me, I think the plan must be far more deliberative. And actually, if the president is going to do anything, the address last night should be coming with a commitment to say, what are we going to do in 3 months, in 6 months, in a year, rather than just simply going nebulously, these are the 5 key focal areas without deadlines as to when it will be achieved and when we'll be able to give accountability back to the citizens.
Granted, he said there will be further discussions with some of the ministers in terms of the various areas and how other aspects are going to be unpacked. But I just want to focus on the IPP element a little bit. Do you welcome the fact that there's no more restriction up to 100 megawatts, that is more open, and that they will, he said they'll be looking into how to reduce the red tape in terms of regulatory environment?
Yeah, that is a welcome step, and it's a step in the right direction, undeniably. Of course, a diversity of energy is not only suitable from the cost of energy, but it's suitable from a climate perspective. So it is the absolute right thing for this country to be able to be engaged in. The increase in terms of the amount of generation you can do is powerful. The only question that we have to respond to is that big infrastructural producers, like, for example, big mining houses, will be able to build plants that are able to meet that requirement. But let's not forget the fact that communities, from Soweto, so know very well that the energy crisis there has not been only a load shedding issue, it's been a long-term issue even prior to 94. So how do we help communities like that who maybe themselves may not be able to build power stations that can be able to meet that threshold? How do we ensure that there's efficacy and funding to assist communities that would ordinarily not be able to participate in a program such as that one?
One of the main aspects that the President announced is the formation of this National Energy Crisis Committee. I mean, there's so much mixed reaction to it currently from various quarters, and some trade unions complaining that they were not consulted at all. The President was selective in his consultation. But when you have such a broad-based committee, I just want to get your sense. I mean, you've been involved in political activism from the days when you were a student yourself at Wits University. Do you think it's workable, such a big, because the crisis is now, as you said, solutions have been provided yesterday, last year, 10 years ago. What's your view about this crisis committee?
One, I think the president outsources too much to people who are not elected. He gives too many committees, too many summits, and too many plans without accountability. We, as the people of this country, elected people. We have a Minister of Energy, we have a Minister of Economic Development, and we certainly have a presidency that we voted for. That's the committee. And he was the chair of the interministerial committee that was meant to do an ESCOM turnaround plan. What is clear is that that plan failed. So then it begs the ultimate question. We can't keep saying to people, well, when the political leadership fails, we are going to outsource thinking to a committee on this and a summit on that. What we desperately need is for political leaders to take accountability. And if they simply can't do the job, we can't just be asking people to step aside because they are corrupt. We must ask them to step aside if they can't do the job they were elected or appointed to cabinet to do.
Okay, just to be fair a little bit, maybe, in my head now, as we conclude, Mr. Maimane, let's maybe give the President this time around benefit of the doubt and maybe look in 3 months' time or in 100 days and say what has been achieved and begin to tick some of those boxes. Or do you think that's being too accommodating in your view?
We lack trust. I think citizens correctly feel the pressure of it. I've always wanted for this country to succeed, as I said earlier. I wish the president can give us some deliberate timelines. So it's very difficult to hold him accountable. When you speak in broad generalities, we will do this, red tape reduction, all of those things. We need deliberate timelines so that we could say all of us are committing to a plan to take it forward. I stand with President Mbeki when he says there isn't a consensus and a plan to address these issues. And that's where the crisis sits. A State of the Nation shouldn't be a nice speech. It ought to be, by the end of this year, we would have done this. So again, I will be looking to the president to say, in 6 months, what have you done? In 3 months, what have you done? And frankly, if those things are not achieved, I would urge that actually we need to, as I stated earlier, the only way we are going to fix this energy crisis is when the ANC is not there, because they brought us into this mess. They cannot be trusted to take us out of it.
Thank you very much for your time and insights here on Today on ENCA, Mr. Mmusi Maimane, the leader of the One South Africa movement.